The rain had not stopped for 3 days, and the city of North Haven had taken on the slick black sheen of a thing that wanted to be left alone. Wren Calloway pushed through the service door of the Iron Birch with a tray balanced on her shoulder and the wet of the alley still clinging to her sleeves. The kitchen behind her churned with steam and the bark of Chef Devorin calling for someone, anyone, to bring him the saffron before he started biting people. The dining room ahead glowed with low amber light, candles burning in cut glass holders, the long oak bar gleaming like something polished by centuries of careful hands. She moved between the tables the way she always did. Quick, quiet, eyes lowered just enough to be unremarkable. A waitress in a pack-owned restaurant survived by being unremarkable. The Iron Birch belonged to the Graycliff line. Every napkin, every fork, every bottle behind the bar was technically the property of the Alpha King himself. And on most nights, that fact lived comfortably in the background, the way a heartbeat lives behind a song. But tonight the background was crowding forward. Tonight the air in the dining room had a weight to it that made the candle flames lean. Wren felt it the moment she crossed from kitchen tile to dining room wood. 5 men had been seated at the long table beneath the window an hour ago. 5 large men in dark coats, who had not given their names, and who had ordered nothing but a single bottle of the oldest red in the cellar, a bottle they had not yet opened. They sat with the stillness of wolves who had finished hunting and were waiting now for the meat to come to them. She knew what they were before the host had even pulled out their chairs. Every wolf in North Haven knew the scent of an unfamiliar alpha. The dining room had 5 of them at one table, and not one of them belonged to Graycliff. And then, 10 minutes ago, the door had opened, and the 6th alpha had walked in. Wren had been folding linens by the bar when she heard the bell above the entrance chime. She had looked up the way anyone looks up at a doorbell. And then she had not been able to look away. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall in the way that made the doorframe seem small and the room seem smaller. Dark coat soaked through at the shoulders. Dark hair pushed back from a face that had been carved out of something colder than stone. He moved through the dining room without hurrying and without looking at anyone, and every wolf in the room felt the floor tilt. Caelan Graycliff, the Alpha King. He had come to his own restaurant on the worst night of the worst week of the worst year, and he had come alone. Wren had not seen him in 11 months. 11 months and 4 days. And her ribs still knew the count of it. She had known him before the title, before the crown of the Western Pax had passed to him in the chaos of his father's death. She had known him when he was simply Caelan, the second son who came to the Birch on Thursday nights and read by the window and asked her once, on a slow, rainy evening that smelled like this one, whether she would walk with him to the river. She had walked with him to the river. She had walked with him to many rivers, in the months after. And then, 11 months and 4 days ago, she had walked away from all of them, and she had not let herself look back. The bond mark hidden beneath the high collar of her uniform throbbed once, slow, like a second pulse waking up. She set her tray down on the bar with hands that were not entirely steady. Wren. Safina, the head server, was at her elbow, voice low. Wren, the table by the window. I see it. They have not opened the bottle. I see that too. They have been watching the door for an hour and a half. Wren looked across the dining room. The 5 strangers had turned, almost in unison, the way a current turns. They were watching Caelan now. He had taken a seat at the small 2-person table near the back, the one that faced the room, the one he had always preferred. He had not removed his coat. He had ordered nothing. He had come here, Wren understood with a slow, sick certainty, because he had been told to come here, or because he had been hunted here, or both. The 5 strangers stood up from their table. They did it together, without a word, the way a single body stands up. Their chairs scraped the wooden floor in a single long sound. One of them, the one in the center, the one with the close-cropped silver hair and the tattoo crawling out from beneath his collar, slid the unopened bottle of wine into his coat pocket the way another man might pocket a pistol. The dining room went very, very still. Ren felt Safina's hand close around her wrist. "Go to the kitchen," Safina whispered. "Go now. You do not want to be in this room." The 5 alphas began to walk toward the back table where the King of the West sat alone. Ren did not go to the kitchen. Ren did not move at all, because the bond mark beneath her collar had begun to burn, and behind her ribs something she had spent 11 months and 4 days teaching herself to forget had just opened one slow, unblinking eye. The 5 men stopped 3 paces from Kaelin Greycliff's table. The one in the center, the silver-haired one, set the unopened bottle down on the white cloth between them with the soft, deliberate click of a chess piece being placed. "Your Majesty," he said. Kaelin did not look up from the menu. "You will want to look at me when I speak to you." Kaelin turned a page. A small muscle moved in the silver-haired alpha's jaw. The 4 men behind him spread out in a slow, practiced arc, 2 to either side of the table, cutting off the lines of sight, cutting off the lines of escape. One of them was a head taller than the others and carried his hands the way a man carries hands he is used to break things. Another had a long, pale scar that ran from temple to chin and pulled the corner of his mouth into the permanent suggestion of a smile. Ren stood frozen at the bar with Safina's hand still on her wrist and counted them the way she had been taught, a long time ago, in a life she had buried. 5 alphas. 1 target. No exits the target could reach, without going through at least 2 of them. This was not a confrontation. This was an execution dressed up as one. "My name," the silver-haired man said, "is Rourke Vexhall. I represent the Concord of the 5 northern packs. We have come a long way to speak with you, Greycliff. I would consider it a courtesy if you would close the menu." Kaelin closed the menu. He did not stand. He did not reach for a weapon, though Ren, who had once known the inside of his coat the way she had known the inside of her own pockets, knew that there was a weapon there. He simply set the menu down on the table next to the bottle and folded his hands on top of it and looked, finally, up at the man who had named himself Rourke Vexhall. "Speak then," Kaelin said. His voice was the same voice. 11 months and 4 days had not changed it. "You have my attention. You are aware," Vexhall said, "that the Western Treaty expires at the end of this month." "I am." "You are aware that the Concord has formally requested terms that you have refused to discuss." "I am aware of the request. I am aware of my refusal. I am unaware of any obligation to entertain the Concord in my own dining room on a Thursday night." "Then perhaps," Vexhall said softly, "we should change the nature of the conversation." The tall one moved. He moved fast, the way wolves move when they have decided something, and he moved toward Kaelin from the left, and the scarred one moved from the right at the same instant, and the 2 behind them shifted their weight to bracket the table, and Ren saw, with the cold, clear vision of a person watching her own hand reach toward a stove she had been told never to touch, that Kaelin was not going to make it out of this chair. He was going to die in this restaurant. He was going to die 10 paces from where she stood. And every promise she had made to herself in 11 months and 4 days, every careful brick she had laid in the wall between the woman she had been and the waitress she had become, every quiet hour she had spent learning to be small and forgettable and safe, and came down at once. Ren shook off Safina's hand. She crossed the dining room in 7 steps. She did not run. Running drew attention, and she had been trained, before any of the rest of it, to do what needed to be done without drawing attention until the very last possible second. So she walked the way a waitress walks, the way a woman who is bringing a bottle of mineral water to a back table walks, and she carried in her right hand the heavy crystal carafe she had picked up from the bar without looking at it. And she reached the table just as the tall alpha's hand was closing on the back of Kaelin's collar. She broke the carafe across his temple. The sound was bright and final, like a bell. The alpha went sideways into the table with the boneless surprise of a man who had not, in his entire life, considered the possibility that a waitress might be the thing that ended an evening. The scarred one turned toward her, hand already at his belt. She was already moving. The thing about the skill she had buried was that it did not need to be remembered. It lived under the skin. It lived in the joints and the breath. The order of the quiet hand did not teach a woman techniques the way a fight school taught techniques. The order taught a woman to be a single, uninterrupted motion from the moment a threat began until the moment the threat ended. And once a body had been taught that, the body did not forget. She caught the scarred alpha's wrist as it came up. She turned it the wrong way. She felt the small, clean snap of a tendon giving and heard him make a sound that was not quite a word, and she put her elbow through the soft place beneath his jaw, and he went down on one knee, and she stepped over him. The two flanking men were closing now, faster, because they had finally understood. She moved between them. She did not try to fight them both at once. The order did not teach a woman to fight two alphas at once. The order taught a woman to make two alphas fight the space she had just left. She slid sideways under the first one's reaching arm and let his momentum carry him forward into the second, and they collided shoulder to shoulder with the heavy, stupid sound of large men learning that they had been outflanked by something smaller and quicker. And before either of them had finished correcting their balance, she had taken the heavy oak chair from the next table by its back rail and brought it down across the first one's spine with both hands. The chair broke. The alpha did not get up. She turned, holding the splintered remains of the chair leg like a short staff, and looked at Rourke Vexhall. Vexhall had not moved. His four men were on the floor, one unconscious, one curled around a broken wrist, two groaning. The dining room had gone so quiet that Wren could hear the rain against the window again. Vexhall looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Kaelin, who had risen at last from his chair and was standing very still, with both hands at his sides, and an expression on his face that Wren did not let herself read, because if she read it, she would not be able to do what came next. "Get out of my restaurant," Kaelin said softly. Vexhall got out of the restaurant. He took his men with him. They went slowly, dragging the unconscious one between them, and the bell above the door chimed once as they left, the same small, bright sound it had made when Kaelin had walked in an hour ago, in a different lifetime, when Wren Calloway had still been a woman who could fold linens at a bar and not be seen. The door swung shut. The dining room exhaled. Wren let the broken chair leg fall from her fingers. It hit the floor with a small wooden sound, and in the silence that followed it, she heard Kaelin say her name, the way he had said it once at a river, 11 months and 4 days ago. Wren. She did not turn around. She walked back through the dining room past the staring faces of the other guests, and past Safina, who was holding the edge of the bar with both hands and looking at her as though she had grown a second head, and she went through the service door into the kitchen, and she took her coat off the hook by the back exit and she walked out into the rain. By the time Kaelin reached the alley, she was gone. He stood in the wet dark with his coat still hanging open and the rain plastering his dark hair against his forehead, and his hands curling slowly into fists at his sides, and on the cobblestones at his feet, half drowned in a puddle, lay a small silver pin in the shape of a closed hand. The sigil of an order that had been hunted to extinction 19 years ago. Kaelin Graycliffe picked the pin up out of the water. His hand was shaking. The bus station on Marrow Street kept its lights on all night because the city had nowhere else to put the people who had nowhere else to go. Wren sat in the corner of the waiting room with her coat buttoned to the throat and her bag between her feet and her hands flat against her thighs to keep them from shaking. The fluorescents hummed. A janitor pushed a mop in slow circles on the far side of the room. A man in a wet parka slept across 3 plastic seats and snored. She had not bought a ticket yet. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that she could not go back to the small attic flat above the bakery where she had lived for 11 months and 4 days, because the small attic flat above the bakery was a place that Wren Calloway lived, and Wren Calloway, after tonight, was no longer a person who could be allowed to exist. She closed her eyes. She did not see the dining room. She did not see Vexhall, or the tall Alpha going boneless across the table, or the scarred one's wrist turning the wrong way under her hand. She had been trained, a long time ago, not to see those things afterward. The Order had taught her many useful things, and one of them was that a woman who replayed her own violence at night did not sleep, and a woman who did not sleep made mistakes, and a woman who made mistakes did not survive. What she saw behind her closed eyes was Kalen's face, not the face he had worn at the back table, the face he had worn at the river. She had been 17 the first time she had seen that face, and he had been 20, and neither of them had been any kind of king. She had been a girl who washed dishes at a riverside inn 3 towns south of North Haven, and he had been a boy in a wet coat who came in alone on Thursday nights and read books with broken spines and tipped too much because he did not know how to tip the right amount. She had not known he was a Greycliff. She had not known he was anything but the boy who said please and thank you, and once, when the inn's old cat had wandered out into the rain, had gone after it himself rather than let her get her uniform wet. She had loved him before she had known he was the second son of the Western King. That was important. She made herself hold on to that. She had loved him before any of the rest of it. And he had loved her too, back then, on rivers, in clearings, in the small private places where the world had not yet found them. He had pressed his mouth to the place beneath her ear and told her, in the dark, that he had been raised to marry a daughter of the Concord and that he was not going to. He had taken her hand, in the dark, and pressed it flat against his ribs and said, "This beats for you. Do you understand me? This beats for you." And she had understood him. She had understood him until the night his older brother had died. The Alpha King's heir had gone off a cliff road in a car that had been tampered with. And overnight, Kalen Greycliff had stopped being the second son and started being the only one. And the world that had not yet found them had found them within the week. She had been waiting for him at the river the night he had been crowned. He had not come. He had sent a letter instead. A letter she had not opened because she had known, the moment she had seen his handwriting on the envelope, what kind of letter a man sent to a woman he could no longer afford to love. She had walked away from the river that night, and she had walked north until the towns ran out, and she had taken the name Calloway off a gravestone in a country churchyard, and she had built a life out of folding linens and bringing bottles of mineral water to back tables, and she had not opened the letter. It was still in her bag now. She could feel it through the canvas, the small flat shape of it, a sealed envelope she had carried for 11 months and 4 days without looking at the words inside. Wren opened her eyes. She made herself look around the waiting room, the janitor, the sleeping man, a woman at the ticket counter arguing softly with a clerk about a refund, the fluorescents, the clock above the door that read 2:15. She had been Wren Calloway for 11 months and 4 days. Before that, for 19 years, she had been someone else entirely. She had been Inara Vethrain, daughter of the last Grandmaster of the Order of the Quiet Hand, and her mother had died on the night the Concord of the 5 Northern Packs had burned the Order's chapter house to the ground and salted the river with the bodies of every man and woman and child who had borne the silver pin. Inara had been 6 years old. She had been hidden in the root cellar beneath the kitchen, with her mother's hand pressed over her mouth, and she had heard her mother's last breath leave her mother's body, and she had not made a sound. She had been trained, even at 6, not to make a sound. The pin she had carried in her coat pocket for 19 years had been her mother's. The pin she had dropped in the alley behind the iron birch tonight had been her mother's. She put her face in her hands. She had spent a lifetime hiding the order. She had spent 11 months and 4 days hiding herself. And tonight, she had broken every rule of both, in front of the only man in the world she could not afford to be remembered by, and she had dropped the pin, and Kalen would have picked it up. Because Kalen picked up everything. That was who he was. And now the Alpha King of the West knew exactly what kind of woman had been folding his linens. The waiting room door opened. Ren did not look up. The order had taught her, a long time ago, that the moment you looked up was the moment you confirmed for the watcher that you were the thing being watched for. She kept her face in her hands, and she let her breathing stay slow, and she listened to the footsteps cross the tile. They stopped in front of her. A woman's voice, low and unfamiliar and very calm, said, "Inara Vethrain." Ren went perfectly still. No one had said that name aloud to her in 19 years. She lifted her head. The woman standing in front of her was small and gray-haired and wrapped in a long traveling coat that was beaded with rain, and she was wearing, pinned to the inside of her collar where only another initiate would know to look for it, a small silver pin in the shape of a closed hand. "My name is Tova Mirith," the woman said quietly. "I served under your mother. I have been looking for you for 19 years, and I am very sorry, child, but you do not have time to run." Behind Tova Mirith, through the glass doors of the bus station, Ren could see headlights pulling into the lot. 3 black cars. Moving in formation. Moving fast. Tova Mirith did not waste a single word. She crossed the waiting room in 4 long strides, bent, took Ren's bag off the floor, and held out her free hand the way a person holds out a hand to someone who has fallen through ice. "Now," she said. "Through the back. The freight door. I will explain in the car." Ren stared at the hand for 1 full second. 19 years of training screamed at her not to take it. 19 years of training also screamed at her that the woman in front of her was wearing the pin the right way, on the inside of the collar with the closed fingers pointing toward the heart, and that no one outside the order had ever known to wear it that way, because the Concord had killed everyone who would have known. She took the hand. Tova pulled her up and did not let go. They moved through the waiting room past the sleeping man and the arguing woman and the slow circles of the janitor's mop, and they did not run, because Tova Mirith was the kind of woman who could move very quickly without ever appearing to be running, and Ren remembered, distantly, the way her mother had walked across a room. She remembered the way her mother had walked across a room the night the chapter house had burned. The freight door at the back of the bus station opened on a loading bay, piled with mail sacks and the wet smell of diesel. A small, unmarked sedan was idling at the curb with its lights off. The driver was a young man, no older than 23, with the same closed quietness in his shoulders that Tova had, and Ren understood without being told that he was order, and that there were more of them than she had let herself believe, and that her mother's people had not, in fact, all died in the river that night. "Get in," Tova said. "Back seat. Lie down across the seat until I tell you to sit up." Ren got in. She lay down across the back seat with her face turned toward the cracked vinyl and her bag clutched to her chest, and the car pulled away from the loading bay with the smooth, unhurried motion of a fish slipping under a dock. Through the rear window, upside down from where Ren lay, she watched the 3 black cars from the front lot turn into the bus station drive at exactly the wrong moment to see her. "Drive normally, Arin," Tova said softly. "Yes, Grandmaster." Ren closed her eyes. Grandmaster. The title had not been spoken aloud in the world for 19 years because there had been no one left alive to bear it. Or so she had been told. Or so she had believed, the way a child believes the sky. She kept her eyes closed and she let the car carry her, and she counted her breaths the way her mother had taught her to count them when she was 6 years old in the root cellar with a hand over her mouth. In 4. Hold 7. Out 8. In 4. Hold 7. Out 8. After a long time, Tova said from the front seat, "You may sit up now." Wren sat up. The city was behind them. The road ran black and shining between low hills with the lights of farmhouses scattered far apart on either side. The rain had thinned to a fine mist that the wipers cleared every few seconds with a small, dry sigh. "Where are we going?" Wren said. "Somewhere we can talk." "And after that?" "That depends on you." Wren looked at the back of Tova Mirith's gray head for a long moment. The older woman did not turn around. The young driver kept his eyes on the road. "You said you have been looking for me for 19 years. "I have." "Why now?" "Because tonight, for the first time in 19 years, you used the hand in front of witnesses." Tova's voice was very even. "Do you know what that means, child?" "It means the Concord knows I am alive." "It means a great deal more than that, but yes. That first." The car turned off the main road onto a smaller one and then onto a smaller one still, and finally onto a gravel drive that climbed between two stands of pine and ended at a low stone farmhouse with a single light burning in an upstairs window. Aaron parked the car under an overhang and killed the engine and got out without a word and went into the house ahead of them. Tova turned in her seat at last and looked at Wren, and Wren saw, for the first time, that the older woman's eyes were the same gray as her mother's had been. "Inside," Tova said gently, "there is a fire. You are shivering. You will not be able to hear anything I say to you until you have stopped shivering." The kitchen of the farmhouse smelled of wood smoke and old bread. Aaron had gone upstairs. A copper kettle was already heating on the stove. Tova pressed Wren into a wooden chair at a wooden table and put a wool blanket around her shoulders and a cup of something hot into her hands before she said anything else, and only when Wren had taken the first swallow did she sit down across from her. "The Concord did not destroy the order in one night," Tova said. "That is the story they tell, because it suits them. The truth is that they have been hunting us, in small numbers, for 19 years. There are 42 of us left. 43, with you. We do not gather. We do not write. We move from house to house. We have waited." "Waited for what?" "For the daughter of the last grandmaster to come of age and reveal herself. For an excuse to come out of the shadows. For the Concord to make a mistake, large enough that the world would believe us when we named it." Tova set her own cup down. "Tonight the Concord made the mistake. 5 of their highest field captains tried to kill the Alpha King of the West in his own dining room. They failed because of you, and the world, child, is going to find out about it." Wren shook her head slowly. "Kalen will not let that out. Kalen Graycliffe has already let it out. He had no choice. By the time you reached the alley behind the restaurant, 3 of the diners at adjacent tables had already begun making calls. By morning, every wolf in the West will know that 5 Concord Alphas surrounded the king at the Iron Birch and were dropped, in under 90 seconds, by an unnamed Omega Waitress." Tova's eyes did not leave hers. "There are now several thousand people looking for that Waitress, child. Some of them want to pin a medal on her. Some of them want to recruit her. Some of them, the ones who put those 5 alphas in your dining room, want her dead before she can be questioned. And you. I want to give you the choice your mother did not get to make." Wren's hands tightened around the cup. "There is more," Tova said. "And it is the part I am sorriest to tell you. May I?" Wren nodded. Tova reached into the inner pocket of her coat and laid a folded paper on the wooden table between them. It had been opened and refolded so many times that the creases were soft as cloth. "This was sent to a safe house in Farron 3 weeks ago," she said. "It was intercepted. The seal was conquered. The instructions were explicit." Wren unfolded it. The handwriting was clean and small and unhurried, the handwriting of a person who had never in their life been afraid of anything they had written down. "The Vethrain girl has been confirmed alive in the North Haven district. She is operating under the name Calloway and is employed at a Graycliff property. Eliminate before she can be approached by any surviving Order asset." Leave no body. She is not to be questioned. She is not to be recovered. She is to be ended. The signature at the bottom was a single letter. K. Wren stared at the letter K until the lamplight on the kitchen table swam. Who? She said. Her voice did not sound like her own voice. Who is K? Tova Mirith did not answer. Aaron came back down the stairs at that moment, 3 at a time, with a hand pressed to one ear and the other already reaching for the rifle that had been leaning against the doorframe. Grandmaster, he said. We have wolves on the North Ridge. A lot of wolves. They are coming fast and they are not order. The lights in the kitchen flickered. The kettle on the stove began, very softly, to scream. Tova Mirith was on her feet before Aaron had finished speaking. How many? At least 9. Possibly more. They are spread along the ridgeline in a hunting arc. Approach speed. 2 minutes, maybe less. Wren stood up. The wool blanket fell off her shoulders. Her body had gone, without her permission, into the slow, steady stillness that the order called the bright place. The place a hand went when there was no longer time to feel things. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her breathing had settled. The bond mark beneath her collar throbbed once, hard, and she ignored it. Doors, she said. Front and kitchen and cellar, Aaron said. Windows. 6. 2 upstairs. None reinforced. Weapons? Aaron looked at Tova. Show her, Tova said. Aaron crossed to a cupboard set into the wall beside the stove and pulled the panel open. The inside of the cupboard was lined with dark felt and fitted with brackets, and the brackets held 3 short-bladed silver knives, 2 longer ones, a coil of braided wire, and a small flat case Wren recognized, with a cold lurch, from her mother's hands. The hand carried only what could be hidden inside a coat. The coat itself was sometimes the weapon. She took 2 of the short knives. She slid one into the side of her boot, and the other along the inside of her left forearm beneath the cuff of her sleeve. She left the longer blades where they were. The order did not fight at distances. The order ended things at the length of an arm. Grandmaster, she said quietly, out the cellar. The cellar has no exit. It has the coal chute. Tova's eyes flickered. You have studied the floor plans of safe houses you have never seen, she said. My mother made me memorize the floor plans of every safe house in the Western network when I was 6 years old, Wren said. I assume nothing has been moved since. Nothing has been moved since. Then we go through the coal chute, into the orchard, down to the creek, and we follow the creek east until we are clear. Aaron stays in the kitchen with the lights on for 2 more minutes after we are out. Then he leaves through the front and goes north, away from us. They will track the noise. Aaron did not look at Tova for confirmation. He simply nodded. Good, Tova said. Go. They went. The cellar was cold and smelled of apples. The coal chute had not been used in decades, and the iron hatch at its top stuck for one sickening moment before Wren put her shoulder under it and shoved, and the hatch swung open onto wet grass and starless sky. She climbed out first. She turned and gave Tova her hand. Tova took it without comment, and the older woman moved up through the chute with a grace that told Wren everything she needed to know about how Tova Mirith had survived 19 years of being hunted. They went low through the orchard. The apples were small and hard and unripe, and they crunched underfoot, and Wren picked their path between the trees by the feel of the ground, because the order had taught her to walk by feel in the dark. Behind them, the farmhouse kitchen window glowed yellow. From the north ridge, downwind and far, came the first sound of a wolf calling to its pack. It was answered from 3 different directions. They are not Concord, Tova breathed beside her. How do you know? Concord wolves do not call. They are silent on approach. These are someone else's hunters. The bond mark at Wren's collar burned again, harder, and this time she did not ignore it. She put her hand to her throat as she moved and pressed her fingers against the place where Caelan Greycliff had once set his teeth, on a night beside a different river, in a different life. The mark was hot. The mark had been a low banked ember for 11 months and 4 days. And tonight, for the second time in 2 hours, it was burning. She stopped under the last tree at the edge of the orchard. "Tova," she said, "these wolves on the ridge, how many of them are Greycliff?" Tova Mirith was quiet for a long moment. "Most of them," she said finally. "I think most of them, child." Wren closed her eyes. She had spent 11 months and 4 days hiding from one man. She had spent 19 years hiding from 1,000 others. And tonight, all of them, every last one, were converging on the same hillside at the same time, and the only direction that was still open to her was the creek. And the creek led east, and east led, eventually, back to North Haven. "He is not hunting you to harm you," Tova said. "Whatever else is true, that is true. He is hunting you because his wolf will not let him do anything else. You do not know that. I know what a mate bond does to an alpha when the mate disappears. I have seen it twice in my life. The second time was tonight. On every face in every report we have received about the King of the West for the last 11 months. He has not been ruling, child. He has been surviving." "Then why?" Wren said, and her voice cracked despite the bright place. "Did he never come for me?" "Because he could not find you. Because you carried, in your blood, and in your training, every method of disappearance the Order ever devised. Because the only person in the world who could have hidden Inara Vethrain from Kaelin Greycliff was Inara Vethrain." Tova's eyes were very dark in the dimness under the tree. "And because the letter he sent you the night he was crowned did not say what you believed it said." Wren went still. "You opened it," she whispered. "I opened the copy he sent to your mother's old contact in the Farron cell, 3 weeks after he was crowned, when the original had not been answered. He believed she might know where you had gone. He was correct. She did not tell him. But she kept the letter. And when she died, last spring, it came to me. I have read it many times, child. I will not tell you what is in it. That is not my place. But I will tell you this. The man who wrote that letter has been waiting for you for 11 months and 4 days. And he is not the man you ran from." A sound moved through the orchard behind them. A small, clean sound. The sound of a wolf's paw setting down on wet grass. A single wolf. Not the pack on the ridge. Closer. Wren turned, and the knife was in her hand without her having decided to put it there, and she stepped between Tova and the sound, and out of the dark between 2 apple trees came not a conquered hunter and not a Greycliff scout, but a single tall figure in a long dark coat, with the reins still beaded on his shoulders and his hair pushed back from his forehead and his face. His face. The face she had seen at the river when she was 17. The face she had seen at the back table of the Iron Birch 2 hours and a lifetime ago. Kaelin Greycliff stepped out of the orchard with his hands open at his sides, and the silver pin of the Order of the Quiet Hand held flat in the palm of his right hand. He stopped 6 feet from her. He did not speak. He was breathing the way a man breathes at the end of a very long run. From the ridge above the farmhouse, the wolf calls had stopped. They had gone quiet. By him, perhaps. Or by something else. The knife stayed in Wren's hand. Kaelin looked at the knife. He did not look afraid of it. He looked, she realized, like a man who had been afraid of so many other things in the last 11 months, that a knife in the hand of the woman he loved was almost a relief, because at least he knew where it was. "Inara," he said. The name went through her like a wire pulled tight. He had never called her that. He had never known to call her that. Wren Calloway had been only a name on a gravestone the night they had walked to the river the first time, and the girl who had washed dishes at the inn 3 towns south of North Haven had been Wren to him from the first afternoon she had set a cup of coffee in front of him without being asked. She lowered the knife very slowly. "How long?" she said. 3 months. 3 months you have known. 3 months I have known your name. 4 hours I have known where you were. Behind her, Tova Mirith said nothing. The Grandmaster of the Order of the Quiet Hand stood very still under the apple tree, a small gray figure who had spent 19 years preparing for a great many possible nights, and was not, Wren understood, prepared for this one. Kalen held out the silver pin in his palm. Yours, he said. It was my mother's. I know. How? Tova's people sent it to me 4 hours ago, through a channel I did not know existed, with a letter explaining what I had picked up off the cobblestones behind my own restaurant, with instructions to come alone, unarmed and on foot, to this orchard, by midnight. He paused. The corner of his mouth did something that was not quite a smile. I came alone. I came unarmed. I did not come on foot. There was not time. Wren turned and looked at Tova. Tova Mirith met her eyes without flinching. You sent for him, Wren said. I did. You did not tell me. I did not tell you because if I had told you, you would have run, child, and we would not be having this conversation, and the Concord would have been on you within the week, and you would have died alone in a city you had not learned the alleys of yet. Tova's voice was quiet, but it did not waver. I am the Grand Master of an Order of 43. I do not have the luxury of letting you make the wrong choice tonight. I am sorry. I will be sorry if you wish it of me, for the rest of my life. But I would do it again. Wren stood between them with the knife loose in her hand and the bond mark burning at her throat and the rain just beginning, again, to come down through the apple branches. She looked at Kalen. Speak, she said. Here. Here. Kalen closed his hand around the silver pin. The night my brother died, he said. I was at the river waiting for you. I had a ring in my coat pocket. I was going to ask you to leave with me. I was going to ask you to come north past the mountains where neither of our names would mean anything. The call came at the river. I was walking back to find you when it came. I did not know, that night, that the car had been tampered with. I did not know for another 4 months that my brother had died because someone in the Concord had decided that the second son of the Western King was easier to control than the first. I did not know. I want you to understand that I did not know. Wren did not speak. I was crowned 3 days later, Kalen said. I was 23 years old. I did not know how to be a king. I had advisors. I had my father's counsel. I had a Concord delegation in my dining room within the week, informing me, with great courtesy, of the terms under which I would be permitted to continue breathing. The terms included a wife of their choosing. The terms included a number of border concessions I will not list to you in an orchard at midnight. The terms also included, although they did not name her, you. The knife in Wren's hand had stopped feeling like a weapon. It felt like a small cold piece of metal she did not know where to put. They knew about you, Kalen said. They had known about you for some time. They had not known your true name. They had known only that the second son had been seen with a girl from a riverside inn, and that the second son had not been able to look at any other woman since. They named you a liability. They told me that if I did not end the connection myself, by my own hand and by my own letter, they would end it for me. You wrote the letter. I wrote the letter. What did it say? Kalen looked at her for a long moment in the dark. It said, he said slowly, that I had been told by the Concord that you were a liability, and that I had been told to write to you and end the connection in language that would not be mistaken, and that I was, as you read this, doing exactly that. It said that I would not blame you if you burned it. It said that everything before this letter had been true, and that everything in this letter was not, and that I did not know how to tell you which words to believe, but that I was trusting you to know. It said that I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to find a way to come back to the river, It said that I loved you. It said that I would always love you. It said that if I did not come for you within a year, it was because they had killed me, and not because I had stopped. He stopped. It said, he said, wait for me, please. If you can. If you cannot, I understand. But please. Ren made a small sound that she did not recognize as her own voice. I did not open it, she said. I know. I carried it for 11 months and 4 days, and I did not open it. I know, Inara. Do not call me that yet. What do I call you? She did not answer for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, the girl who washed dishes at the inn was Ren. She was Ren before she was anything else. She was Ren before she knew who her mother was. She has always been Ren. I would like, if you can, to be Ren a little longer. Ren, he said. She let out a breath she had not known she had been holding for 19 years. She did not go to him. She did not yet. But she did not move away when he closed half the distance between them, and she did not move away when he opened his hand again and held out the silver pin, and she did not move away when she lifted her own hand and let him set the small, cold weight of her mother's pin into her palm and close her fingers around it. His fingers stayed on hers. The bond mark beneath her collar steadied for the first time in 11 months and 4 days, and through it, distantly, like a window opening in a house she had thought was empty, she felt him. She felt how tired he was. She felt how thin the thread had been getting. She felt the long, unspoken howl that had been living under his ribs since the night at the river he had not been able to come to. I have been, he said quietly, very alone. I know, she said. You felt it. Every night. He closed his eyes. A footfall in the wet grass behind the apple trees, fast and wrong, broke them apart. Tova Mirith had already turned toward the sound, knife in her hand, mouth open to call a warning, when the first crossbow bolt came out of the dark and took the older woman through the shoulder, and Ren Calloway, who had been Inara Vethrain, who had been Ren Calloway again for the length of one held breath, dropped to her knees in the wet grass to catch the Grand Master of the Order of the Quiet Hand as she fell. From the dark beyond the orchard, in a voice that was new to Ren and yet not new at all, a man called out calmly, the way a man calls out across a hunting field. Inara, come out, child. Your uncle has been waiting a very long time. Tova Mirith was heavy in Ren's arms. The crossbow bolt had gone clean through the meat above the collarbone, and the older woman was breathing in short, controlled drafts, the way a hand breathed when a hand had been hit and did not yet know how badly. Ren's fingers were already on the wound, 2 below the bolt, 1 above, finding the artery, finding the angle, doing what 19 years of training had taught her hands to do without being asked. Do not pull it, Tova said through her teeth. I am not going to pull it. He will be flanking. He always flanked, even when we were children. I know, Ren said, although she did not know, although she had not known until that moment that she had ever had an uncle, although the word uncle had landed inside her chest like a stone dropped into a deep well that she had not, in 19 years, been allowed to look down into. Kalen was on one knee beside her with his coat already coming off his shoulders. He folded the coat into a thick pad and pressed it against the entry wound on the back of Tova's shoulder without being told, and his free hand had drawn the gun she had not seen him draw, and the gun was in his lap, pointed at the dark between the apple trees. Ren. I hear him. How many? At least 2 with him. Probably 4. He never moved with fewer than 4. You have never met him. My mother described him to me when I was 4 years old, in detail, in case he ever came to the door. She made me describe him back to her every night for 2 years until I could do it in my sleep. She did not tell me he was her brother. She told me he was the man who would one day try to take me, and that I was to run from him in the direction of fire if I had to choose between fire and him. Kalen did not say anything to that. He simply moved his body half an inch to the left so that he was more thoroughly between Ren and the dark, and he kept the gun where it was. And from somewhere on the far side of the orchard, the calm voice came again. Inara, the Grandmaster will live or die in the next 10 minutes depending entirely on what you do. I would like you to consider that carefully. Tova's hand closed around Ren's wrist. He is lying, she breathed. He always lied. Do not listen to the words. Listen to where the words are coming from. Ren listened. The voice was coming from the southwest corner of the orchard, near the low stone wall that ran along the creek. But there was a second sound, very small behind it, that did not belong to the voice. A small, soft sound like a coat brushing the bark of a tree. Northeast. Closer than the voice. 20 paces, maybe 15. The flanker. Kalen, she said. Tell me. Northeast. Inside 15 paces, single. And the voice? Bait. Kalen moved. He moved the way she had not seen him move at the restaurant, because at the restaurant he had not yet been allowed to move, and now he had been allowed. He went up off his knee in a single uncoiling motion and into the dark between the apple trees, and there was, very briefly, no sound at all. And then there was the wet, hard sound of a body hitting the ground from a height it had not been expecting, and then there was nothing again. Kalen came back through the apple trees with the second crossbow in his hand and the bolt already loaded. He set the crossbow down beside Tova without comment. The voice from the southwest had gone quiet. Ren understood, in the silence, that her uncle had just learned, for the first time in his life, that the Alpha King of the West was inside the orchard with her. Inara, the voice called, slightly less calm. I will give you one further opportunity. Step out from behind the king and walk to the wall. The Grandmaster will receive medical attention. You have my word. His word, Tova said flatly. His word, Ren agreed. She raised her own voice for the first time. Uncle, she called. Tell me your name. The pause from the southwest was brief, but it was a pause. Corvin Vethrain, the voice said. My mother's brother. Your mother's brother. You signed the letter to the Concord with the letter K. I sign all my correspondence with the letter K, child. It is a habit from a different life. The letter instructed them to leave no body. The letter instructed them to be efficient. I would not have permitted the Concord to take you alive. There are worse things, Inara, than a clean death at the hands of someone who shares your blood. Ren looked down at Tova Mirith's grave face in the wet grass. He betrayed the order, she said quietly. Did he not? 19 years ago. He is the reason the chapter house burned. He is the reason, Tova said. My mother knew. Your mother knew. She was carrying you out of the cellar when she met him in the kitchen door. He had a pistol. She had a knife. She was faster than he expected, and she put the knife through his hand, and she went past him with you in her arms, and she got you to the cellar, and she went back upstairs to finish what she had started. He killed her on the kitchen stairs. He has carried the scar through his right palm since. If you ever see the scar, child, you will know him. Ren closed her eyes for one breath. Kalen. Here. He is going to come around the wall on the right, low, because he favors the right because of the scar. He will send the second flanker up the middle to make me look at the middle. I will look at the middle. You take the right. Do not let him get within 10 feet of Tova. Understood. And Kalen. Ren. Do not kill him. Ren. I need him alive. The Concord did not act alone 19 years ago. He knows the names. He is going to give them to me. A long silence in the orchard. Understood, Kalen said. The second flanker came up the middle exactly as she had said. He was fast and he was good, and he was not as good as a hand. and he made it 3 paces past the line of apple trees before Wren's first knife took him in the meat of the thigh, and the second came across the inside of his wrist, and his crossbow dropped, and she was on him before the crossbow had hit the grass. She did not kill him. She put her knee in the small of his back, and her forearm across the side of his neck, and she held him there until the breath went out of him, and the body went slack. And she rolled him face down into the wet grass and bound his wrists with the braided wire from her boot. And she stood up, and Kalen was already coming back through the apple trees from the right, with a man pinned under his arm, dragging him like a sack of grain. The man under Kalen's arm was small and gray and very thin, and he had, on the back of his right hand, a long old white scar in the shape of a knife wound that had healed badly. Kalen dropped Corvin Vethrain in the wet grass at Wren's feet. Wren looked down at her uncle for a long time. Corvin looked back up at her. He had her mother's eyes. He had her own eyes. "Hello, niece," he said softly. "You have grown." From the ridge above the farmhouse, a wolf howl rose, long and low, and answered immediately by a dozen others, and Wren understood, with a small, cold tilt of the world, that Kalen's wolves had not, in fact, been called off. They had been called down. And they were coming through the orchard now, fast in formation, and the first of them broke through the apple trees behind Kalen with its silver coat dark with rain, and its eyes the color of a winter morning, and it did not look at Wren or at Tova or at the bound man in the grass. It looked at Kalen, and it bowed its head. The silver wolf was the size of a large pony, and it was, Wren understood without being told, the lead wolf of the Greycliff royal pack. It bowed its head not to its king but past him, to her. A second wolf came through the apple trees behind it, smaller and dark-coated, and bowed in the same way. A third, a fourth. By the time the line of apple trees had finished giving them up, there were 11 wolves in the wet grass of the orchard, all of them in their wolf forms, all of them in a loose half-circle around her, all of them with their heads lowered. Wren had not, in 19 years, understood the look on a wolf's face when it was looking at the daughter of a grandmaster. She understood it now. The Order of the Quiet Hand had not been simply a guild of Omega-trained fighters. The Order had been the keepers of a much older thing, a thing the Concord had wanted to destroy, not because the hands had been dangerous, although they had been, but because the hands had been witnessed. The wolves of the old packs had known them. The wolves of the old packs had bowed to them. The wolves of the old packs had remembered, even after 19 years of being told to forget, the scent of the women who walked through their territories with the silver pin pinned to the inside of their collar. The Greycliff royal pack remembered. The silver wolf in front of her was old. Old enough, Wren realized, to have been alive 19 years ago. Old enough to have served Kalen's father. Old enough, perhaps, to have served Kalen's grandfather. It made a soft sound in its throat, and Kalen, behind her, said quietly, "His name is Bernick. He has wanted to meet you since the night I brought your pin home. Brought it home. To the den under the castle, where the old pack sleeps. I laid it on the floor in front of him, and I told him whose it was, and he has not slept properly since. None of them have." Kalen's voice was very careful. "They have been waiting, Wren. In a way I did not understand until I saw it. They have been waiting." Wren went down on one knee in front of the silver wolf. She did not know why she did it. The Order had not taught her this. The Order had taught her to fight alphas, not to kneel to them. But the silver wolf called Bernick dipped his great head until his nose was a hand's breadth from her own, and she lifted her hand, slowly, and laid it flat against the wide bone of his forehead, and the wolf closed his eyes. She felt through her palm the way an old soldier feels. She felt grief. She felt the long, dull ache of a creature who had spent 19 years carrying a debt he had not been able to pay, and who was, finally, being given the chance to pay it. She bowed her own head to him. When she stood up, Every one of the 11 wolves in the orchard was watching her with the same waiting in their eyes, and behind her, very softly, Tova Mirith was laughing in the wet grass, the small dry laugh of a woman who had not laughed in 19 years and was not entirely sure she remembered how. "Oh, child," Tova said. "Oh, child. They never forgot us." "No," Wren said. "They never did." The bound flanker in the grass had begun to stir. Corvin Vethrain had not. He lay on his side with his hands wired behind his back and his face turned away, and Wren understood that her uncle had also seen the wolves bow, and that her uncle had also understood what their bowing meant, and that her uncle was now performing the small, careful arithmetic of a man who has just learned that the tide he has been swimming with for 19 years has, in the last 90 seconds, turned. "On your feet, Corvin." He did not move. "On your feet, or Bernick will help you." The silver wolf's lips drew back from his teeth in a slow, soundless snarl, and Corvin Vethrain stood up. Kaelin had already begun, with his free hand, to make a small folded gesture that two of the wolves at the back of the half-circle understood, because they peeled off from the line and shifted into men in the same motion. Two tall, pale-eyed men in dark clothes, who appeared to have been wearing the clothes inside the wolf the entire time, and Wren did not, in that moment, ask the question of how shifters carried clothing, because she had more important questions to ask. The two men took Corvin from her. "He is not to be harmed," Wren said. "He is to be taken to a place where he can be questioned. By me. Personally. Tomorrow." "Yes, my lady," one of them said. The honorific did not sound foreign in his mouth. He had said it. She understood. The way a man says a word he has been waiting 19 years to say. She watched them lead her uncle out of the orchard. Her uncle did not look back at her. When he was gone, the wet grass in front of her was suddenly empty of everything except the bolt-shot Grandmaster of the Order of the Quiet Hand, and the lead wolf of the Grey Cliff Royal Pack, and the man she had loved before she had known what love cost. Kaelin came around to face her at last. He had been holding himself, she understood now, at a careful distance the entire time. He had been letting her work. He had been trusting her to do what only she could do, and he had been standing close enough to act if she needed him, and far enough away that she would not feel watched, and that, she thought, was the answer to a question she had been asking herself for 19 years without knowing she was asking it. He had always done that. He had always known how to stand close enough. "Wren, I am here. The Concord knows everything by now. The 5 at the restaurant, the hunters at the ridge, your uncle in custody. They will move tonight. They have been preparing the move for some time. I think we have until dawn." "To do what?" "To get back to North Haven, to the castle. They will already be there. They will already be in the council chamber. They will already be sitting in my father's chair telling my own people that I have lost the bond and lost my mind, and that the West needs a regent." His mouth did the not quite smile again. "It is what I would do, in their place." Wren lifted her chin. "Then we go to North Haven," she said. "Now." "Wren." "What?" "There is one more thing." He reached, slowly, into the inner pocket of his coat. He drew out a small, flat envelope. The envelope was creased and worn at the corners, the way an envelope creases when it has been carried in a coat pocket every day for 11 months and 4 days. It was the letter. Her copy. The unopened one. The one that had been in her bag at the bus station. The one that should still have been in her bag at the bus station. The one that Tova Mirith, when she had taken Wren's bag off the floor, had also, apparently, taken. Tova, in the wet grass, made a small sound that was almost a laugh and almost an apology, and was, in the end, neither. "Forgive me," the Grandmaster said. "I sent it ahead with Aaron. I told him to give it to the king in the orchard if the king came alone. I told him the king had earned the right to put it back into your hand himself." Wren looked at the envelope. She looked at Kaelin. She held out her hand. He laid the letter into her palm. She broke the seal in the wet grass of the orchard, with the lead wolf of the royal pack watching her, and she opened, at last, after 11 months and 4 days, the letter Kaelin Greycliff had written her on the night he had been crowned King of the West. She read it. She read it twice. When she looked up, her face was wet in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. "All right," she said. "All right. We go to North Haven." North Haven Castle sat on the highest of the city's 7 hills, and the council chamber sat at the heart of the castle, and at the heart of the council chamber sat a long oak table that had been cut from a single tree in the year the first Greycliff had taken the west. By the time Wren walked into that chamber, 11 men had taken the seats around the table, and not one of them was a Greycliff. Rourke Vexhall sat in the chair at the head. He had cleaned up since the iron birch. The bottle of Old Red was on the table in front of him, open now, breathing into a cut-glass decanter. He looked up when the chamber doors opened, and he saw Kaelin first, because Kaelin was in front, and his face did the small, careful adjustment of a man who had been told that a problem was being managed, and was learning, in real time, that the problem had instead walked through his door. Then he saw Wren. He saw the silver pin on the outside of her collar now, where every man in the room could see it. He saw the silver wolf called Bernick at her left hand. He saw the Grand Master of the Order of the Quiet Hand standing on her right, pale from blood loss and upright by sheer will, with her own pin on the outside of her own collar for the first time in 19 years. Rourke Vexhall set his glass down very slowly. "This is an internal session," he said. "This is a stolen session," Kaelin said, "and you are sitting in my chair. Your Majesty, please. Stand up, Vexhall." Vexhall did not stand up. The other 10 men around the table did not stand up either. They had been chosen, Wren understood, for the particular kind of stillness that men acquire when they have decided before the meeting that they will not be moved by anything that happens during it. They had been chosen to outlast a single angry king. They had not been chosen to outlast the daughter of the last Grandmaster of the Order of the Quiet Hand, because for 19 years no such person had been believed to exist. Wren walked to the head of the table. She did not look at the men. She set, on the oak between Vexhall's hands and his glass, the small folded paper that Tova Mirith had been carrying in her coat. The letter. The K letter. The one that named the Vethrain girl and instructed the field captains to leave no body. Vexhall did not look at the paper. "That is not admissible," he said evenly. "It is not in a court," Wren said. "We are not in a court. This is the Western Council, and you have no standing here." "This is a chair," Wren said, "and you are sitting in it." She lifted her eyes for the first time and she let him look at her. 11 months and 4 days of folding linens. 19 years of being small. 6 years old in a root cellar with her mother's hand over her mouth. The river, the inn, the gravestone in the country churchyard. The first time Kaelin had said her name and meant it. The bond mark beneath her collar. The silver pin on the outside of her collar. All of it. All of her. Behind her eyes when she looked at Rourke Vexhall. Vexhall flinched. He did it before he could stop himself. It was a very small flinch. It was the flinch of a man who had been taught, as a boy, by an older woman in a coat, what it meant when a hand looked at you, the way a hand looked at you when she had decided. He had not seen that look in 19 years. He had thought he would never see it again. "You knew my mother," Wren said. Vexhall did not answer. "You were at the chapter house the night it burned. You were a young man. You were not yet a field captain. You were standing outside the kitchen door with a torch in your hand and instructions from the Concord, and you were waiting for the signal from the man inside, and the man inside was my uncle, and the signal was a knife thrown through a window. I have been told the story this morning. I would like you to confirm it." Vexhall's hand on the table went white at the knuckles. "You will not get a confession out of me, child." I do not need a confession out of you. She turned slowly and looked at the 10 men around the table. Stand up, she said. 3 of them stood up. 3 of them stood up immediately, without looking at Vexhall, without looking at one another. They stood up the way men stand up when they have been waiting, for a long time, to be given permission to choose a different side. One of them was older than the others, a thin man with a clipped white beard, and he was, Wren saw, weeping. Forgive me, my lady, the white-bearded man said. I served your mother. I have sat at this table for 19 years and I have not been able to say so. Forgive me, please. Sit down, Henrik, Vexhall said sharply. Henrik did not sit down. The other 2 men who had stood did not sit down either. A 4th man stood up, slowly, looking at the 3 who had stood before him, and then a 5th, and then a 6th. And Rourke Vexhall, who had walked into the council chamber at dawn with 11 men behind him, watched 6 of them peel off the bone of his coup in the time it took him to draw 3 breaths. The remaining 4 did not stand. They did not stand because they had been bought, Wren understood, with something larger than a chair, and she knew in the bright place inside her what would have to happen to them, and she knew that she would not be the one to do it. Kaelin would. Kaelin would do it lawfully and publicly and in daylight, in front of the assembled packs of the West, and she would stand at his side while he did it, and she would not flinch. That was, she understood, what a queen was. Vexhall reached, very calmly, very slowly, into the inner pocket of his coat. He did not get there. Bernick moved. The silver wolf crossed the room in a single low bound, and his great head was in Vexhall's lap, before Vexhall's hand had closed on whatever was in the inner pocket, and Bernick's teeth, which had not been bared in earnest in 12 years, were a finger's breadth from the soft hollow at the base of Vexhall's throat. Vexhall went perfectly still. Slowly, Wren said. Take it out slowly. Set it on the table. Vexhall took out a small glass vial. He set it on the table. The vial was full of a clear liquid Wren did not recognize, but Tova Mirith, behind her, made a small sound, and Wren understood that whatever was in the vial was the thing that the Conquered had used. The night they had wanted her father's brother to walk into the kitchen with a knife in his hand. A drug. A compound. A small, tidy chemical betrayal in a glass tube. Kaelin stepped up beside her at last. He looked at the vial. He looked at Vexhall. He looked, at last, at the 4 men who had not stood up. Take them, he said. All 4, and him. Hold them in the lower keep. The Concord will receive a delegation from this council by midday. The delegation will inform the 5 northern packs that the Western Treaty is renewed under terms I will dictate, in writing, by sundown. The 5 will accept those terms, or the 5 will discover what the West does when its king is no longer alone. He turned his head and looked at her. My queen, he said. The chamber went very quiet. Wren felt the bond mark at her throat steady, again, the way a bell steadies after the last ring of it. My king, she said. They were married at the river. Not the river in North Haven. The other one. The one 3 towns south, behind the inn where she had washed dishes when she was 17, where the bank flattened into a long stretch of pale stones, and the willow trees leaned out over the water as though they were listening. It was a small wedding. Kaelin had wanted, at first, the great hall of the castle and the assembled packs of the West and the cameras from every pack journal in the country. Wren had told him no. Wren had told him that she had spent 11 months and 4 days being unseen, and 19 years before that being unnamed, and that the first time the world saw her standing beside him, she would like, please, to be standing beside him at the river. So they were married at the river. Tova Mirith performed the ceremony. She had recovered enough from the bolt to stand on her own, although she leaned when she did not think anyone was watching on Arin's arm. Bernick the silver wolf lay across the pale stones at the river's edge like a long old sword laid down, and the rest of the royal pack lay in a half circle behind him, and at the back of the half circle, in their human forms, stood the surviving 42 of the Order of the Quiet Hand. They had come out of the shadows at last. They wore the silver pin on the outside of their collars now, all of them. They did not look like a hunted order. They looked, Wren thought, the way an order looked when it had been given permission to remember itself. Henrik of the White Beard gave her away. He had asked her, 3 weeks before the wedding, in the small, careful voice of a man who had not asked permission for anything in 19 years, whether he might. He had served her mother, he had said. He had not been able to save her mother. He understood if Wren preferred someone else. Wren had told him there was no one else she preferred, and Henrik had wept, again, the way he had wept in the council chamber. She wore her mother's pin at her throat. She wore Kaylin's grandmother's ring on her left hand, a thin band of plain gold that had been worn smooth by 4 generations of Greycliff queens, and that fit her, on the first try, the way a thing fits when it has been waiting. When Kaylin said the words, his voice was very steady. When she said them back, hers was not, and she did not mind. And he laughed at her once, gently, the way he had laughed at her at the inn when she had spilled coffee on his book the second time, and she laughed back at him through the tears, and Tova Mireth, who had spent 19 years not laughing, laughed too. The bond, when it completed, did not feel like an explosion. It felt like a door that had been ajar for 11 months and 4 days finally, quietly, closing into its frame. She felt him. Not the way she had felt him in the orchard, in flashes, through a thread that had been worn thin. She felt him the way a person feels her own pulse, steady, unhurried. There. He felt he had told her once on a different night by this same river, like a man who had been holding his breath without knowing it. She understood now what he had meant, because she felt him let the breath out. He felt hers go out at the same moment. They held each other on the pale stones with the willow trees listening and the wolves watching and the Order of the Quiet Hand wearing their pins on the outside of their collars in daylight for the first time in 19 years. And for a long moment neither of them spoke, because there was no longer anything that needed to be said in words. Afterward there was bread and wine and a long table set up on the grass behind the inn, and the old innkeeper who had hired Wren when she was 17 sat at the head of it and cried into his soup and was not embarrassed. Arin danced badly. Tova danced not at all, and watched, and her gray eyes were wet whenever Wren looked at her, although she did not, at any point, let a tear actually fall. Corvin Vethrain was not at the wedding. He was in the lower keep at Northaven, where he would remain until the Concord trial, and where he had, in the 3 weeks since the orchard, given up every name on every list that Tova Mireth had spent 19 years not being able to compile. He had given them up, in the end, because Wren had gone down into the keep, and she had sat on the other side of the iron grate from him, and she had said, very quietly, that she was the last Vethrain, and that he was the last Vethrain, and that she would like, before he died, for him to do one thing in his life that would have made his sister proud of him. He had given her the names. He had wept while he gave them to her. She had not wept back, because the bright place did not let her, and because he had not earned her tears. But she had at the end, when the names were all written down and the guards were coming to take her out of the keep, she had reached through the iron grate and laid her hand on the back of his scarred right hand for the length of one slow breath, because he was, in the end, still her mother's brother, and her mother had loved him once. She had not gone back down to the keep after that. She did not need to. The Concord trial was scheduled for the spring. The wedding was in the autumn, and after the wedding came the winter. And the winter was the first winter of her life that she did not spend hiding from something, and it was, she discovered, very long and very quiet, and very full of small, ordinary mercies. Kaylin read by the fire on Thursday nights with broken-spined books. She made tea. Bernick the silver wolf slept on the rug between them and made small, old dog noises in his sleep. Sometimes she walked to the kitchen at midnight and folded a stack of linens, not because anyone needed them folded, but because her hands, which had spent 19 years being trained for one thing and 11 months, and 4 days being trained for another, were learning, slowly, to be trained for nothing at all. In the spring, the Concord trial ended the Concord. In the early summer, she stood beside Kaylin in the great hall of North Haven Castle while he renamed the Western Treaty, and she watched the surviving lords of the 5 northern pacts sign their names beneath his on a piece of paper that did not, for the first time in 2 centuries, contain a single secret clause. In the late summer, she discovered she was carrying a child. She told Kaylin at the river. Of course, at the river. She had told him she wanted to go for a walk after supper, and they had walked. The way they had walked when she was 17, and he was 20. And at the bank where the willows leaned, she had taken his hand and laid it flat against the place under her ribs that no one else could feel yet. And his face had done something she did not have words for, and he had gone down on his knees on the pale stones and pressed his forehead to her belly, and stayed there for a long time without speaking. When he stood up, his eyes were wet. "Wren," he said. "Kaylin, thank you." "For what?" "For coming back." She put her hands in his hair. The river behind him was moving the way a river moves when it has been moving for a very long time and intends to keep moving. The first stars were beginning to come out over the willow trees. Somewhere upriver, a single wolf, very far off, made a long, unhurried sound that was not a hunting cry and was not a warning and was, simply, the sound a wolf makes when it is glad. "For coming back," she said, "always, from this river to every river after it. Always." He kissed her on the bank where she had once spilled coffee on his book, and the willow trees listened, and the river kept moving, and somewhere very far away, in a quiet stone house on a quiet hillside, a small gray-haired woman with a silver pin on the outside of her collar set her tea down on a wooden table and looked out the window at the first star and smiled the way a grandmaster smiles when she has, at very long last, gone home. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.